Welcome to a special series called The Global Crisis Monitor, featured on the Treasury Update podcast. Thank you for joining. On this episode of the podcast, series host Meredith Zonsius checks in with Alexa Cook and Craig Jeffery of Strategic Treasurer on the 7th week results from the COVID-19 Impact and Response Survey. They discuss elements of the improved economic outlook, the continued concern around health, and how organizations are shifting their priorities. Listen in to find out how Treasury and finance professionals are weighing in as time goes on. Welcome back to the show, Craig and Alexa.
Thanks, Meredith.
Yeah, it's good to be here again.
We are now 7 weeks into the weekly Global Crisis Monitor. Let's start off with the top headlines.
Last week we talked about a two-peat or a repeat. This week it's a three-peat, and this is on the topic of how organizations have improved with their liquidity picture. This is the third time in positive territory, so it's week over week over week. And this last measure, 27% saw their liquidity outlook improving versus 14% deteriorating, so almost 2-to-1 in this previous week. So it's been a good 3 weeks, which points to the overall brightness of the monitor outlook this week. From the economic level, the headline is, when we look at the 3-month and 12-month time domains, the 12-month was the most positive we've seen it, 5.55, where 5 is equilibrium. And the 3-month, the shorter time domain, reached 4.41, where 5 is equilibrium. So it's still negative, but that is the highest number for the 3-month outlook. Last week was 4.13. The week before that was 3.97. And all the prior weeks were lower in the threes. So very good look on the economic standpoint. What this looks like between a couple of different measures we have is one looks like somewhere around 8 months for solid economic posturing, so early January. Another measure we look at puts it out another couple months past that. So we're looking at early January to maybe March based on what the respondents are saying.
I have one more headline to add there, and it's that there was still a major negative shift on the health outlook. The extension of time until COVID-19 becomes a minor health issue has decreased to about 8.5 months after spiking to 10 months in last week's survey, and then the inflection point remains the same as the last few weeks at just under a month.
Let's look at some new questions we asked in the survey. We asked about if the COVID crisis caused any reconsideration that was not previously prioritized.
Yeah, we asked a few questions on that topic. One of the headline questions there, we found that about 1 in 5 didn't do any reprioritization. But those that did reprioritization, 56% of those had projects related to liquidity planning and forecasting. That was the number one by a significant margin. Number 2, at 42%, were working on counterparty risk management. That was a heightened concern, and you can see that tying into AR and maybe financial institutions. Payments was the next, and we lumped in 2 categories together that were quite high. So payment security and payment process security, 40% had reprioritized what was going on there. And payment security training, 28% of firms saw that as an area that they've reprioritized. You move down further, visibility, communications, and connections with banks at 31%. And then moving farther down, I'll just highlight hedging at 17%. Now, that sounds like hedging might not be a big deal, but for those organizations that have foreign exchange risks and activity there, that 17% represents a significant percentage of those organizations with that type of exposure.
How are people feeling about their organization's outlook on liquidity positions?
I can take that one. So this is our 3rd week of improvement, and that gives us additional optimism that things could be changing. If we were to get 2 to 3 more weeks in a row, we'll likely change our pessimistic outlook. And then the top 2 concerns, again, were the same, which were the first being direct financial impact to the business, and the second is access to adequate liquidity. And then a third concern came up, and that was recession in the economies in which we operate.
So each week I ask you about AR and AP. Any changes on the negative outlooks here?
No, we haven't seen any changes to the AR outlook. It's still super negative. We've had every one of the 7 weeks come in hyper negative over the previous week.
Another question we asked this week was a free-form question on concerns. Has anything bubbled up?
I love this question because people can type whatever they're thinking. And, we use those words and, put them in those word charts to see which ones are more current or more common and popular. It's very interesting to read those and see them. So number 1 was layoffs, furlough, job loss. Those items were with the largest amount of frequency. Number 2 were related to liquidity, cash flow. Third had to do with the recession, concerns about systemic drop in the overall business. So recession took third place. Reopening the economy was all the way down to number 4. There were a lot of different descriptions that caused it to be put into this category. Are we opening too fast? Are we balancing finances and health properly? How do we keep workers safe while being more productive, keeping businesses moving? So lots of concern about getting that balancing act right. And then number 5 was volatility. And there were certainly a lot of other items on that list, but certainly a lot of concerns. And they've been changing over the weeks of the monitor.
Interesting. Before we break for the week, what do we need to be thinking about for the weeks ahead?
Well, we've seen more positive numbers. I want to see if those continue. This is the most optimistic monitor that we've had since the crisis began. So maybe we'll be thinking about that, a potential alternate title of the Global Recovery Monitor when it becomes positive for a while. But some of the same things from last week. We need to continue monitoring job losses. What's happening? Does that stop growing at the level it's been? Second, what's the view on liquidity? Does it continue that trend, as Alexa had mentioned? Those are a couple of 2 of the items that we want to keep our eyes out for.
Yeah, and then I think there's a third item too, and it's in the health area. We probably just want to watch to see if there's going to be a bounce back in the number of cases with people being out more.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing, and look forward to speaking with you both again next week.
Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you.
We wanted to encourage you to take the Global Crisis Monitor survey repeatedly while it's live. It runs from Wednesday to Tuesday every week. You can go to treasurycoalition.com and follow the links. Add your voice and insight so that as a profession, we can take positive and knowledgeable steps to move our organizations and nations forward. Invest 5 minutes each week at treasurycoalition.com and get great information and insights while helping our profession and organizations.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.